Good morning! We are down to the third part of the RPAS webinar series. I hope you were able to learn something from the lectures as well as the discussions. Now that we already have the basics and you were already reminded of the safety protocols as well as the security protocols that you have to consider, let us talk about aircraft registration. Yes, by aircraft registration, we mean your drones because those are considered as aircrafts that affects our airspace. As regulators, we will keep on reminding you that safety should always remain fundamental, and the best way to enhance safety across the board is to enhance the safety culture of an organization. And that is what we have been doing here in CAA Philippines. Part of this is the conduct of this webinar series as an awareness to the public. Today, we are taking you higher. This is getting exciting. Welcome to the third part of the RPAS webinar series. Our first speaker is Ms. Rhoda Bathan from the Airworthiness Department. Rhoda is a Civil Aviation Regulations Officer 2 of the Aircraft Registration section of the said department. She will discuss what takes place in the actual practice of RPA registration.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rhonda Bathan from Aircraft Registration Section of Airworthiness Department. I am here right now to present to you everything about the aircraft or drone registration, and which includes the requirements and probably the procedures. But before that, I will present to you the eligibility for the registration, who really are eligible to register their drones in the Philippines. Are we all eligible? How about the foreigners or foreign citizens? How can they be able to register their drones here? So I'm going to start my presentation right now. Pursuant to Section 44 of Republic Act 9497, eligibility for registration. So if you're a natural born Filipino citizen, then you can just register your drone immediately if you're going to use that certain drone for commercial operations. But what if you're a foreign citizen? Then you have two options. First option is that you have to list that drone or have it registered under a corporation with 60-40. 60% should be owned by Filipino citizen. And lastly, your other option is, or if you don't have any corporation or company, then you can also register it through by being a member of a flying or aero club in the Philippines, which aims only for recreation and sports or for the development of your flying skills. According to Philippine Civil Aviation Regulations, PICAR 4.2.1.1, no person may operate a drone or civil aircraft unless it has been registered under the Philippine Aircraft Registry or if CAAP has issued the Certificate of Aircraft Registration. So, if you conduct a commercial operation for drone service and you do not have any aircraft certificate of registration, then definitely that's already a violation for this certain provision. So you really have to be careful that when you conduct any commercial operations or any drone service that will be for the in furtherance of your business, then you really have to register your drone for certificate of registration. Then the certificate should be, of course, in English. Then we have here for PICAR provision 4.3.1.2, it states here that a drone or an aircraft should have a permanent marking. And it's for drones specifically, it should be waterproof. Why? Because there are times that you use your drones in a rainy season. So as much as possible, it really has to be visible and waterproof. Also, it should be contrast in color with the background. For example, your markings are in color white, then your background is color black. That is acceptable. But if your marking is like, for example, color pink and the background is red, that is not acceptable to these authorities. Again, it should be in contrast color with the background. And of course, it should be legible so that just in case an accident or incident will happen, any person who's who saw that drone, they will be easily identify that that drone is owned by certain registered owner. So they can just verify it in CAAP. So what are the requirements for RPAS registration? First is you need to have a notarized registration form. You can just download this at caap.gov.ph. All the items here should be filled filled out. Like, but if there are instances in the items that are not applicable in the drone, since this was basically based from the manned aircraft vehicle, then just put there not applicable. But on some items, please try to fill out everything. And of course, since it's notarized, you should have this notarized and strictly no erasures. So we're very, very strict in aircraft registration section that we really check if there are erasures. We don't accept any erasures here since this is a public document and you have it not notarized. Prescribed fees. For the fees, in all drones, the fees is 1,500 pesos plus 12% of tax. So that is, regardless of the weight, 1,500 pesos plus 12% tax. And penalty. This is penalty is only for the revalidation, just in case you fail to revalidate or renew your drone at a certain validity period. Next will be the letter of intent. You should submit a letter to this authority, address it to the OIC Flight Standards Inspectorate Service, to Captain Donaldo A. Mendoza, stating that you intend to register your certain drone. State in your letter all the details of that certain drone. Be specific with the manufacturer, the serial number, and the model. History of ownership is most of the time this is only applicable to those drones that has been leased or subleased. But so far, we haven't received any yet. So you can just skip that part. Copy of letter request for the reservation of RPAS registration marking. So in the procedures of RPAS registration, this is actually the very first thing that you should do. You should call CAAP Aircraft Registration Section at 79442165 to ask any of the aircraft registration officers and your number. You ask, like, for example, a certain number is given to you, like RPU 666A. Then take note of that number, then try to submit a letter of intent stating that you ought to reserve that certain number. Then you have to wait. Again, this is important. You really have to wait that the reservation of the drone will be assigned to you. That's what we have here in the next page, the copy of letter approval. Once you submit your letter of intent for the reservation, then the CAAP or this authority will reply back to you stating that yes, approved. Your registration number is reserved to you, but it is only valid for 90 days. Why? Why 90 days? It is because there were certain, in the previous years, we received several reservations in aircraft, and then like they were trying to reserve like 50 or 30 numbers, only to find out that after several years they did not push through with the reservation. So the numbers were not able the numbers were not used by other operators just because they reserved that, but turned out they didn't push through it. So but if just in case after 90 days you did not register your drone yet, you can still apply for the letter of extension. You can extend the reservation of that certain number. Just try to submit again a letter to CAAP asking for the reservation. What we have here, you should also provide colored photographs of your registration markings with attached to the drone. I like this certain drone because it complies primarily on the PQR part 4 that I mentioned earlier. If you can look at it closely, the background is color black, as I mentioned earlier, and then this one is color white. So it is very legible. So even if you fly that for certain meters, you can easily see the numbers pasted on it. And we verified that this is really waterproof. They used like a decal sticker for this one. And another example, you should also put registration markings in the controller. They also included the serial number, which is also part of the requirements, markings, and the serial numbers. There you go. Proof of ownership. Examples for this proof of ownership are invoice, bill of sale, lease agreement just in case it will be leased to somebody, just in case that you did not buy your drone, because there are some people or operators who tend to create their own drones. So instead of presenting to CAAP their evidence of ownership like invoice, they can just provide an affidavit of ownership. They should state there in their affidavit that that certain drone was created by them and it is their own drone. And you should have it notarized, just like this one. For drone for drones that are under or operated by a certain corporation, you should also submit secretary certificate. This should be issued by the corporate secretary himself or herself. Like for example, this one. You should state there in the secretary certificate that the corporation will have to register a certain drone. You also have to specify what drone, the details of the drone. Then we have here the import document. This is a copy of the customs release certificate. Just in case you bought your drone outside of the Philippines and then you hand carried it through an airline, there's no need for you to have this one. But this is only applicable to those drones which are big enough, or the remotely piloted aircraft systems, just like the Agras, the big ones which will be temporarily being held at the customs. So you need in order for the customs to release your drone or your RPAS, you have to present a customs import document from the authority. How do you do that? First is you have to request CAAP that you're gonna import a certain drone. Then you have to wait for CAAP to reply stating that the authority has no objection for the said importation. Then that letter you will have to present that to the Bureau of Customs. And then they will give you this customs release certificate. For corporations, of course, you have to submit the Securities and Exchange Commission document and DTI certificate if applicable. If you already have an existing remotely piloted aircraft systems operator certificate, you should also submit that. But if none, just leave it or just put not applicable. Insurance policy. This is also one of the most important requirements in the aircraft registration requirements, because it should have a third party liability. So any once your drone is registered, you as an operator and even the public will have an assurance that they are safe, because they know, or they will be able to know, that your drone is insured. So just in case something bad will happen to the drone or an accident or incident will transpire, then there is a third party liability. So at least there is a sense of accountability on the part of the operator. Currently, here in the Philippines, we have now registered 444 RPAS or drones. In the span of 3 to 5 years, we already have 444 drones. It is also important for, if you submit all the requirements, it should be all in original copies or certified true copies from the issuing entity. We are very strict in this one because a certificate of registration is an evidence of ownership. So we don't really accept any photocopies. So again, if for example, SEC provided you a copy, try to ask for a certified true copy from the issuing entity. Only the SEC can provide you the CTC. So I think that's all for my report. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something today.
Our next speaker is Mr. Edmund Lexter Eclarenal. He is an air traffic controller of the Air Traffic Service of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. Now that you already know the fundamentals of RPAS operations, and you have your license and you've registered your RPA, Mr. Eclarenal will introduce you to the Philippine airspace where you will integrate your drones together with other manned aircrafts.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the webinar series sponsored by the RSDD and the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. Today's topic is about the RPA in the Philippine airspace. One of the challenges facing today by the air traffic controllers and the air traffic service is how to manage and integrate the RPAS into the Philippine airspace. Obviously, because of the performance characteristics of the RPAs may not be like that of the typical manned aircraft and may pose some challenges for air traffic controllers. And in order to integrate it seamlessly into the airspace, they must, as much as possible, comply with the operational procedures that exist for manned aircraft and flight operations so as not to pose safety risk to persons, property, or other aircraft. This session aims to educate the public of the technicalities of the RPAS registration, especially those used for commercial operation. It will also give an overview on how our air traffic service process waivers, NOTAM, to efficiently manage air traffic in the Philippines airspace. As an introduction, according to NASA, an estimated 700,000 unmanned aircraft system called UAS or RPAS, but commonly known as drone, are expected to be roaming the sky by the year 2020. We are now in the 2020, ladies and gentlemen, and many have questioned about how such a big change to the airspace will affect our lives and safety. The RPS technology advanced quickly and price is coming down. We are expecting more and more drones are being used by neighbors, colleagues, and of course companies. And however, as sophisticated as technology is, accident happens. When anything mechanical is operated by humans, there is always a possibility of errors, injuries, and property damages. Well, we have identified the air traffic service and co-op have identified RPAS operational safety issues, and they are number one, the risk and potential consequence of mid-air collisions with another RPAS or manned aircraft, and the risk of loss of control of an RPAS. The third is the risk of intentional misuse of an RPAS, and whether the use to which an RPAS is put is military or government, commercial, leisure, or hobby. I'll give you an example about RPS operational safety issues. It happened on December 8th of 2014, a recorded passenger plane in a near miss with drones close to Heathrow Airport. I hope this not happen in our country. Another two example of loss of control resulting to crashes. These are an example. The only good news there is that the pilot is still alive, at least. Another one is when a drone activity is sighted near the airport authority usually close the airport to prevent further incident. This happened in 2020, 2019, December 20, 2019 at Gatwick International Airport. And it cost the airport authority 1.4 million euros and the airline operator totaled to 15 million euros or nearly 1 billion pesos. This is the most current and costly for the airline industry. And I cannot imagine if we close international airport like Naiya in the Philippines, even Mactan or Davao. This is devastating, and we don't want those. We don't want it to happen. Those example I mentioned above is one of the reason why the International Civil Aviation Organization published a manual titled Manual on a Remotely Piloted Aircraft System. The first edition was published in 2015. It is also the foundation of our own version of the regulation under the Philippines Civil Air Regulation Part 3, Part 11.11, and it starts to study how to safely integrate the RPAS into the Philippine airspace. It is now one of the priorities nowadays because we cannot expect or we cannot accept the accident and incident like I mentioned earlier. This regulation by COP is being followed by the manned aircraft. The question is, can the RPAS technology follows considering the restriction, limitation, and importance of the aircraft registration? Well, the air traffic service is here under the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. We will provide you guidelines and procedures on how to manage air traffic safely, orderly, and expeditious. The air traffic service is one of the ANSP providers under the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. There are three departments under the air traffic service, and the Air Traffic Control and Airspace Management Department and AICD are directly involved in handling your requests for processing your NOTAM before you can start operation. There are four divisions under the Air Traffic and Airspace Management Department. Number one is the AFPDD, the Airspace and Flight Procedures Design Divisions. You can see there in your left. And then we have the Area Control Divisions. By the way, the Airspace Division handles airspace planning. It designs restricted areas, danger areas, prohibited areas, training areas, military areas, and other controlled airspace which the other aircraft or RPAs are not allowed to enter without proper authorization from the Air Traffic Control Department. Again, the Area Control Center, it is managed by air traffic controllers and manages traffic and control under or within the Philippine area of responsibility. We call it in a technical term within the Manila Flight Information Region. They manages airways, jet training areas, instrument flight rules, and VFR traffic above, or I can say at a higher altitude. And the next division that helps you guide or that helps you process your requests towards flying your RPAS is the Approach Control Division, which manage the terminal control areas, the control zones, the standard arrivals and standard departure routes, including the climb and descent area within the close proximity of the airports. And maybe you'll ask, is it our concern to know about these areas? Yes, it is, especially on the next division, which handles traffic within the airport, the aerodrome control division. There are more than 70 airports in the Philippines, and in every airport there is, you can see an aerodrome control tower. It is just this is like a symbol of air traffic service where there are air traffic controls. It's just a reminder that there are air traffic controllers manning your airspace, especially aircraft below the aerodrome traffic zone are very restricted and must follow the standard of the air traffic controllers. because there are traffic circuits that being followed by the airlines or by the aircrafts. There are also landing and takeoff areas. We have also VFR corridors that is being used by small aircraft to arrive to the airport, and the helicopter routes. Helicopters, helicopter use lower altitude, 400 feet or 500 feet and below, and this is very concerning about your traffic. The RPAS is subject to must be subject to air traffic control because there are many helicopters flying below 500 feet, especially if it is near the airport. Even if it's beyond the airport, there are other aircraft using low altitude, like the agricultural aircraft or seaplane in both. We call it seaplanes in Subic or somewhere in Visayas where there are many islands, like in Boracay. There are other airports. There are other aircraft flying in there using their seaplanes. And imagine if you're flying below the 500 feet and an aircraft landing there without your knowledge. Just imagine the disaster. So this is a reminder for you, the audience, and we are thankful about this seminar because we are here to present the controlled airspace, which this is, if not being followed by the manned aircraft and the new entrants, the unmanned aircraft operators, you just enter into uncontrolled airspace, something wrong will happen. In our technical term, the airspace of defined dimension within which ATC services is provided is called the controlled airspace. Example of controlled airspace are airways. Airways or air route is defined corridor that connects one specified location to another at a specified altitude, along which aircraft that meets the requirement of the aircraft may be flown. In the layman's term, you have highways on the ground. We call it airways up there, where no one is allowed, no aircraft is allowed to enter that airspace without proper authorization from the air traffic controllers. It is a must. This usually the responsible division or the unit handling traffic on the following airways are the area controllers or Manila ACC, which usually handles flight level or 13,000 feet and above up to flight level 400. It depends on the following airspace. Now, once an aircraft enters the 60 nautical mile radius towards the airport, they will enter on what we call the terminal control area. The terminal control area is from the center of the airport up to 60 nautical miles. The TMA is the most busy control zone. This is an aviation term to describe a designated area of controlled airspace surrounding a major airport where there is a high volume of traffic, like Ninoy Aquino International Airport, Mactan International Airport, Davao, and Clark International Airport. And this is the most challenging for you because the aerodrome traffic zone requires aircraft at a lower altitude. Usually, traffic around the aerodrome traffic zone uses 2,000 feet and below. And maybe you can start asking, is 400 feet dangerous for the aircraft, for the manned aircraft? Yes. Why? Well, an aircraft landing and taking off is using lower altitude. Helicopters traversing the airport or landing towards the airports or helipads within the airport uses lower altitude at 4,000. That's why we are requiring all RPAS to follow the regulation established by the CAAP to follow the 400 feet and the 10 nautical mile radius rule. You are not allowed to operate within 10 nautical miles, 400 feet and below, without proper asking or without asking the authority, the CAAP, of a waiver. for you to start the operations. Now, is it possible, considering the technicalities and the complexity that we are giving you, to integrate the RPAS into our airspace? Yes, we have solutions. The integration of RPAS in Philippine airspace will be a gradual process, slowly but surely, because it builds upon the technological advances and development of our associated procedures. So we are dependent on your requirement. We will accept, we will study your request, and then we will apply and maybe create new procedures in order to safely integrate the RPAS procedure or technology into the existing air traffic management procedure. Again, the process begins with limited access to our airspace, and while some RPA may eventually be able to seamlessly integrate with manned flights, many may not. Now, the solution again, and just as a reminder, in order to integrate properly, you have to follow the regulations of CAAP and airspace requirements. That is the only solution to have a safe integration. These airspace requirements include but are not limited to communications, navigation, and surveillance requirements. And under that is the standard separation for other traffic and your goal to separate from the clouds in other terrain. The first step in the successful integrations, as I always repeat, is through registration. This was mentioned earlier on the presentation, maybe on the first part or the second part, but just a reminder that integrating into the air traffic management and air traffic management procedure or into the Philippine airspace is through registration, certifications. We want to know the CAAP and the air traffic service and other ANSP providers need to know your design, your performance characteristics that will be on the certification requirements by the FSIS or under the CAAP. Without registration, there's no way we can integrate safely to air traffic management in Philippine airspace. Registration required, as you can see in my slides there. Number two is regulation and flight rules. This is the second step. After you have your certification and you're already registered in CAAP, we need you and we're expecting you to follow the regulation and the flight rules. You have to know by heart the right of way, the rules of the air, the visual line of sight operation, if this is beyond visual light operations, and then the 400 feet in the 10 nautical mile, 10-kilometer radius rule, and other restrictions and limitations. After having the registration and regulation flight rules knowledge, this is now part of the CAAP and the air traffic service to approve your request to fly into a certain airspace. Like I mentioned, the controlled airspace. To allow you to enter into a controlled airspace, which is being managed by the air traffic controllers, you have to submit a request in order for us to know the AFPDD about your area of operations. We want to know your operating altitude. AFPDD wants to know the type of operation, if it is military, commercial, or anything, in order for us to issue a NOTAM or waiver. You can safely, then that is the only time when you can start operating or start flying your drones, the RPAS, into a controlled airspace. It's not exclusive to the controlled airspace. Even beyond the 10 nautical mile radius, there are other controlled airspace that you need to avoid. For example, the danger areas, restricted areas, and military facilities. You are not allowed there. And of course, private areas, you are not allowed to enter that without a proper clearance. Then the next is about the ATM procedures. ATM procedures is very, very complex if you don't have the knowledge about it. Because the flight planning, the ATC standards for VFR rules, and the separation standards are already there. It's in place many, many years ago. We are using this. We are using that to avoid incident and accident. We're using phraseology, standard phraseologies, and we're using different contingencies and emergencies in case something happened to your aircraft. All of these procedures are already in place. Considering the RPAS is a new technology, the question is, do you have the capability to have contingency and emergency procedures? Can you follow physiologies and separation standards to make sure that we are flying safe? You will fly safe within the Philippine airspace. That's a challenge for the new entrants like you, the RPAS industry. And trainings, of course. We are continuing. We have designed, we have programmed to continue our training at the Civil Aviation Training Center for the air traffic controllers to know all about the RPAS system informations, performance characteristics. And also, we are expecting that the RPAS community has its own training curriculum or manual to improve how you fly your drones. And then the last is the safety management system. The end goal of all of this seminar, especially this part 3, is to inform the public about the technicalities, about the importance of registration, the rules, flight rules, the requirements, the air traffic management procedures and trainings. But without safety management system, through the hazard identification and risk assessment, we cannot prevent accident and incident from happening. To avoid incident and accident, we encourage you to apply your own SMS in your organization. Because in air traffic service and in CAAP, this is the center of our operations. That all new activities or change in the procedures, we apply the SMS. Without it, and this is common in our aviation industry, and there's a saying that if you think safety is expensive, you have to try an accident. Now, I would like, before I give you the references, I just want to end my presentation by reminding you all that this is an ongoing process and there's only one solutions in order to properly integrate the RPAS technology into the Philippine airspace, into the air traffic management, into the air traffic management procedures. We have to follow the broad principles of flexibility on the part of the regulations, and how to accept requests, and then openness on the part of the RPAS community to give us updates on what is happening in your community. Is there innovations going on? It is like sharing of information for the regulators so we can adapt to the challenges you are giving to the CAAP. And the last, of course, is the collaborations. We cannot have a successful integrations without the collaboration of the regulators, the CAA, the ANSP providers, the air traffic service, and the RPAS community. That ends my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for listening. But I'm gonna give you some documents for further reading. You can download the documents free from the website, the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. You can download the Philippine Civil Air Regulation Part 11.11. You can also download the Manual on Remotely Piloted Aircraft System, the RPAS document 10019. This is the first edition by the International Civil Aviation Organization. It is nice to know to download the Memorandum Circular 29-15 titled Amendments to the Philippine Civil Aviation Regulations. Of course, you can also, if you want to have a further knowledge about how we do air traffic controlling, you can download the Air Traffic Management Procedures for Air Navigation document 4444. And I include also there, you can browse the Scribery website. I put there the link. And of course, uh, you can visit our partner, the Philippine Drone Association.org. There are many important updates about the RPAS community, right? And that's it. Thank you. You can visit my Facebook page or call my number or text if you have further information or inquiries about my presentations. And you can also email the ats.atcomd@gmail.com. That ends, and thank you very much.
We're on. Thank you. Good morning again, and welcome to the third part of our RPAS webinar series. I am here today with Ms. Roda Batan from the Aircraft Registration of the Airworthiness Department of the CAAP, and Mr. Edmond Lexter Bernal, an air traffic controller of the Air Traffic Services of the CAAP. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Good morning.
Brother.
I learned a lot from your lectures. This part of the series has been, I found it very hard because it is very technical, knowing that we have a speaker from the airworthiness department as well as from the air traffic services, and this is not really that familiar to our viewers, especially that this is usually applicable for large aircrafts and for the airlines. We have several questions here that have been asked during the previous parts of the series. I think this goes to both of you, but I will go first with Miss Roda. What drones or RPAS must be registered with the authority? And why do we have to register it? Previously, you said that those drones
Commercial
commercial
use or in
use.
furtherance of your business. Or like for example, I have an engineering firm and then I want to use my drone to check the area. So that's part still as that is still considered as commercial because it's an in furtherance of your business. Also, those drones with weighing 150
Kilograms.
kilograms above, you have to register it. So why do we have to register? Well, first of all, for public safety, so that those people on the ground are aware that if anything bad or if an accident or incident will happen, then they know who is accountable because that specific drone or the control has undergone several procedures to register their drones here in the Philippines. And also, what else? Why do we have to register? Because it maybe soon. There's this new bill by Secretary Pimentel. I'm not sure when it will be. Senator Pimentel. Sorry about that, Senator Pimentel. It will become a law soon enough. So if that will happen, at least we are ready that your drones are already registered in the Philippines because in that law, I believe it is all drones will have to be registered under our authority. And I think that's all.
Yeah.
Sir Edmund, from the safety side of the air traffic service, do you think it is necessary or is it important to register this drone?
Yes, it is actually the first step towards the integration of the unmanned industry to the air traffic management, yung registration po. Why? In air traffic control, kailangan malaman namin kung sino yung kausap namin sa airspace. And of course, hindi natin malalaman yan kung sino yung kausap namin unless registered po kayo sa Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. We want to know the type of aircraft, your performance characteristics, kung sino ang manufacturer niyan. Like just like of the manned aircraft, kailangan halos ganun po ang ating interpretation diyan or ang aming pag-handle sa mga eroplano. Kung papasok kayo at isasama kayo sa air traffic management na ginagawa natin.
So, you mean, as an air traffic controller, kailangan nalalaman nyo lahat ng detalye about the aircraft, the controller, and why?
Yes. Sa ginagawa natin namin ngayon, for example, this is an example of how we deliver traffic information to another aircraft. An air traffic controller usually issues traffic information kung may traffic. This is an actual example, for example, Philippine 143, traffic at 12 o'clock, race 5 miles. Paano kung tatanungin kami ng piloto, no? What is the type of that traffic? What kind of traffic is that? It's just a drone. Okay, can you tell me the altitude? Sorry, sir, I don't have information. How big is the traffic? We don't have information. So imagine the complexity ng air traffic controllers, ng situations kung wala kaming information. Unlike, for example, kung complete information kami, example, Philippine 143 traffic at 12 o'clock, range 5 miles, Boeing 747, altitude at 400 feet, eastbound, outbound. So madali. Sa situational awareness po ng mga piloto, madali nilang maintindihan kung alam nila kung ano yung binibigay namin traffic. That's why it's a mandatory para sa amin na ma-register natin.
Can I also add a learning? Because there are certain cities or local government units that they really require you to have your drones registered. Like for example, in Davao City, they are very, very strict with the ordinance or like there are certain guidelines that you have to register your drone or else they have the power to enforce the Philippine Civil Aviation regulations. So they can confiscate your drone. So there are also more cities now trying to enforce the regulations of the CAAP. So we have to be careful with that. So as much as possible, you really have to register your drones. So for the safety of your drones then.
Last week, in our second part of the series, we were with Lieutenant Colonel William Rodriguez, and yes, he also emphasized the importance of drone registration and a responsible RPAS controller in the maintenance of our public security naman. Kasi it will save a lot of lives, it will save a lot of time and hassle if we are all responsible enough. And also, yung mga local governments din natin, it will also help them in the promotion of public safety and security if these drones will be registered, and also if these controllers will also be responsible. Rhoda, is a controller certificate a prerequisite for the registration of the drones?
No, because you can simultaneously apply for an RPAS controller certificate and for the RPAS drone or the drone registration so that para hindi sayang yung pagpunta niyo dito. You can simultaneously process it.
How long will the registration process?
For the original, assuming that you have your complete documents, so that would be 15 days based on our approved Anti-Red Tape Act. So 15 days, but if there are certain like legal complications with your documents, then we have to forward it or endorse it to our enforcement and legal service. Like just in case you have like sublease agreement or wet lease agreement, so we have to forward it. So additional 4 days, then that would be total of 90 days. But if all the evidence of ownership is okay, then it's just 15 days or less. Don't worry. it can be less than 15 days.
So we will try to
Assuming all the
shorten.
documents are complete.
Um, Another thing that I have observed is that these drones used to be characterized as toys or weapons for use in the military, and now it has transitioned to being used for photography, and it really already evolved. Sir, as part of the air traffic service, did you encounter any challenges in the integration of these unmanned aerial vehicles in our airspace?
Yes, very, very much. Especially dito sa, pag pumapasok kayo dito sa tinatawag na control zones. Ang control zones po, ito yung ibig sabihin, meron dyan nagmamanage ng airspace, which is the air traffic controllers. So, ang control zones na yan ay exclusively dapat sa mga naka-registered at manned aviation industry. Kung papasok kayo dyan, medyo mahihirapan talaga kami dyan. That's why nilimit natin, nirestrict natin ang pwede lang pumasok sa control zones na yan po ay dapat yung mga registered at may authorization sa CAAP. Nagbigay kami ng 10-kilometer radius. Kanina nabanggit ko po yung 10 nautical miles. 10-kilometer radius and 400 feet sa uncontrolled airspace. Pero pag nasa controlled zone po kayo, katulad ng nasa airport tayo, from surface up to certain altitude or level. Pag nasa aerodrome, hindi po yan. So immediately after airborne ng aeroplano nyo, hindi po, pinagbabawal po natin ang mga drones yan. The only way to get access to the controlled airspace is by getting a waivers or authorization from the CAD.
Yes, sir. Follow-up question. It is prohibited to fly in 10-kilometer radius, and you already discussed in your lectures that because yung mga naglaland na aircraft are flying in low altitude, so halos same lang sila.
Yes.
Do you have any instances or any reports na nakakita yung piloto ng drones? I don't know, somebody nagkwento lang sa akin na ano daw, paland na yung aircraft and may kasabay silang drone. Has that happened or was that reported?
Sa amin, wala kaming na-experience yan. But look at the example nung binigay ko sa aking presentations sa United Kingdom, International Airport sa Gatwick. May nakita lang ang airport authority na activity, drone activity within the 10-kilometer radius. Anong ginawa nila po para hindi magkaroon ng accident? Ginawa nila lahat ng aeroplano. Hinold lahat ng aeroplano sa ere, sa mga reporting points. Yung mga nasa ground, hinold ng control tower, air traffic controllers sa control tower, na wag mo nang titake off because it's a disaster talaga. Devastating, catastrophic, kung ang isang drone makapasok sa engine ng aeroplano.
Yes.
That's, hindi ko, unimaginable yan. So, the only way that we can do that talaga sa air traffic control side ng mga air traffic controller is to ground until we feel secured na wala na talagang drone activity dyan. Yung sa UK, umabot sila ng 3 days na kinold nila yung airports.
And imagine the economic effect of that. This is one example of, I'm sorry to quote it, but it is very irresponsible. It is an irresponsible use of these kinds of technology because for you, it will not affect you, but look at the collateral damage of it all. And plus, if there will be any untoward incident that will happen, just imagine, ano ka na lang dito, wag naman sanang mangyari yung pumapasok na drone doon sa mga engine ng airplanes, but imagine yourself being in that airplane, di ba? Or imagine your family being in that aircraft where you can see the drone. It's really very, very important to take these safety precautions seriously. Is there any difference, sir, with controlled airspace and uncontrolled airspace or a prohibited airspace?
Yes, nice question, attorney. Yung controlled airspace, dalawang klaseng airspace na minamanage ng air traffic controller sa air traffic service. One is the controlled airspace and the uncontrolled airspace. From the name itself po, controlled airspace, kailangan mo ng air traffic controller authorization. So meron tayo yan. There are more than 70 airports in the Philippines, so hindi tayo mahihirapang ma-identify yung mga controlled zones na malapit. Exactly, in-specify na ng CAAP yan na 10-kilometer radius, yan po ang controlled zone if you are within the airport. Okay? So, ano naman yung uncontrolled airspace? Beyond, kung wala ka sa controlled airspace po, nandun ka sa uncontrolled airspace. Diyan, mas marami kayong freedom to operate your drones, but you just have to follow the standards. Ano yung 400 feet rule, na hindi ka tataas dyan, and then kailangan i-follow mo yung mga visual line of sight operation or BBB laws, and then the right of way, the rules of the air. Ganon, ini-expect namin na once you are operating your own drones, alam na po natin lahat dyan, yung mga procedures and guidelines and how to operate the drones. And pangalawa, magiging madali po para sa atin, that's why may regulation tayo, na hindi naman namin talaga pinagbabawal pumasok sa control zone, attorney. Ang kailangan nyo lang po ay inform lang si CAAP through air traffic service para malaman namin kung sino kayo, anong operation ninyo, para naman mabigyan natin information yung ibang manned aircraft na meron diyang activity. Usually, binibigyan namin kayo ng volume reservation, yung airspace reservation exclusively for you within a coordinate or zones para kung sino man ang dadaan ng aeroplano, like helicopters and other aircraft or agricultural aircraft or even your parehong drones, ma-warningan lang na meron dyan para ma-prevent natin yung collision.
Yes. And these regulations coming from the regulatory side, it is not to prohibit you or to restrict you. Kasi we were talking a while ago about people who do not want to register their drones, who do not want to get a controller certificate, just because CAAP is restricting them. Well, as much as we would like to keep safety a paramount consideration, we would also like to help you integrate these drones seamlessly in our airspace. Parang kumbaga nagkaroon tayo ng yung traffic sa baba dito. Parang ganun din po yung ginagawa natin sa taas. Yun nga lang, not a lot of people kasi masyadong wide yung coverage na, not a lot of people could see it. But believe me, as much as these restrictions are medyo strict siya, we would like also this technology to be integrated in our airspace. Yes. We have a question here from Mr. Arvin Pagana. Do we need to put, I think this goes to Ms. Roda, do we need to put Philippine flag as marking in the registration of our aircraft? I mean, halimbawa, this is a drone owned by Roda. Kailangan ba nating lagyan ng Philippine flag dito?
No, the fact that the registration marking is already RP, that means Republic of the Philippines, and it's considered as. But if you want, sure, why not? If you're patriotic, no. But as long as the markings are really very visible.
Nakikita din po ba yan sa towers? Yung
Actually, unfortunately, no. Yung mga malalaking aeroplano, yung mga gagaling nating air traffic controller sa tower, yes, may mga binoculars siya. Pero yung kasing big aircraft, right, Airbus 747, pag binoculars niya, kita mo naman yung register, RPC 5913, and then meron nga siya dyan na Philippine logo. I don't know if applicable niya sa drone, pero like what you said, man.
Patriotic then why not?
Tinawag na sa amin attorney yung sinabi ng piloto na halimbawa ang aircraft registration ko is RPC 1234, and then okay na sa amin yun, may record na tayo lahat doon. Pag sinerge namin sa system namin all the informations na ibinigay ninyo during your registration, nakikita kaagad natin yan sa ating system, sa air traffic management system natin.
also with regard to registration, what is a controller serial number? This is from Mr. Patrick Joseph of Yana. What is a controller serial number and how is it different from a model serial number? Hindi ko alam to.
The controller serial number is actually that's most we don't get in registration. We only get the drone serial number, which is the model serial number. But as regards to controller serial number, I think that's the RPAS controller's number, or we call it the certificate, or in layman's term, kind of like a license. So that's outside of registration. So there's somehow it creates confusion. RPAS controller certificate or the controller's number is your kind of like a license number. However, on the model serial number is the model of your drone itself.
Uh, Another for registration. What is the validity period of this certificate of registration?
It is valid only for 1 year. So, like for example, we issued the certificate of registration on October 15, and then after 1 year, the last validity period is October 14. So on the 15th, you can no longer use your drone. So you have to renew it at least 1 month. So again, if it's October 15, it will be issued on October 15. Then by October 14, that will be the last day that you can use your drone, unless you have to renew it. And you really have, I really want to encourage you guys to renew your drone for registration, since we have a certain penalty for that. It's 20,000 pesos, even just for 1 day. So at least 1 month before you can renew it. And for renewal, you can renew it for 1 to 5 years validity.
So the initial validity period is 1
Just
year.
for 1 year.
And then when you renew it,
They have a choice for 1 to 5 years, and that depends on the fees you have to pay.
so how much is the fees here?
So, like for example, for the revalidation or the renewal, it's 1,500 pesos plus 12% tax. So, if you want to renew it for 5 years, then just have to multiply it by 5.
But what about for the initial application?
For the initial application, it's 1,500 plus 12% tax.
Percent tax. Mahal. We have one question here from Chard Ted Mons, 77. Does activities involving agriculture, promotional shot of heritage sites, news, live feeds, etc., kailangan po ba may J2 clearance? So, sir, I think this is
Sa air traffic service po, kung magkakataon man, if your operations of your drone will be inside the airport, I mean the 10 kilometer radius, kailangan niyo po yan from surface, above, kailangan yan. At actually, ito ang ating dilemma, no? Kasi ang economic activity nasa within the airport, the 10 kilometers. So maraming magre-request yan. Marami na po kaming na-approve niya, nabigyan ng waivers sa Clark International Airport dahil grabe ang economic activity dyan. So marami nagre-request dyan kung paano daw sila, mga photography ba po yan?
Yes.
So, mandatory po yan na magkaroon kayo ng J2 clearance. It's another requirement naman, exclusive for the J2 security reason.
Yes.
Papasok ba kayo sa...
I think if
Yes.
their drones has cameras and malapit siya doon sa mga restricted areas like military camps and other controlled din ng mga confidential or mga restricted areas, I think you have to get a J2 certificate.
Yes.
J2 clearance. Okay. We also have, what are the necessary things that needs to be remembered or important things that is checked ng airworthiness department when it comes to drone registration?
For the drone inspection, as long as we comply with the requirements set forth by Philippine Civil Aviation Regulations Part 4, especially it really has to be waterproof and permanent. Because I had this one applicant, he just printed using a piece of paper, and sometimes they just use pencil pens for the registration markings, and then they want to have it inspected, and then they claim that it's waterproof. Well, technically, it's not waterproof. So, as much as possible, have it permanent and waterproof and very visible.
I think that is also contained in the memorandum circular. If you are wondering what is the law or the regulation that governs this RPAS, we have CAAP Memorandum Circular 29-15 and PICAR, Philippine Civil Aviation Regulations, Part 11, Part 4 for the registration. And we have those we compiled those, including the materials of Mr. Eclarenal in our Google Drive, and you can look at the the description link of this part, and you may click the link, and those resource materials are there, and you may download it.
Can I also add, attorney, because since we already mentioned the inspection, to some of you who are very far from Manila, or to those people living in Visayas and Mindanao, you can actually just ask, or you can write a letter to CAAP requesting for an inspector so that kami na lang yung pupunta sa area ninyo. So just in case, kasi I'm pretty sure some of your concerns are it's too far, so at least you can go to your place. You just have to write a letter to CAAP.
So we were talking about, sir, about J2 clearances and the ATS clearances. What are the factors that the ATS take into consideration before allowing people to operate in this prohibited or controlled airspace?
Number one naman po ang number one factor, of course, yung impact ng operation ninyo dito sa existing user ng airspace natin, which is the manned industry, yung commercial operation natin. Titingnan natin yan. Saan po ba yung area of operation niyo? If it is directly on the final approach of our runway, for example, runway 06 or runway 24 in Manila, ang runway 24 po, yung bandang kahabaan niya nasa libingan ng mga bayani, di ba? Kung you want to, gusto niya magkaroon ng operation dyan, of course, hindi namin kayo papayagan. Kasi yan ginagamit ng final approach. So that's one of the requirements. Makaka-apekto ba kayo? If yes, unable. Pero kung inevitable ang inyong request, baka pagbigyan. Kaya we are flexible naman. No? Tinitingnan namin muna kung ano ba ang requirement ninyo. Hindi pa naman kami nagdi-disapprove, honestly, sa air traffic service ng mga requests. Kasi kung alam namin importante, approve yan. Kailangan yan. Pero yung mga hindi naman, I'm sorry, meron naman kayong ibang locations siguro mapupuntahan. Ano?
Yes.
Yun ang number one consideration. I think yung iba, kahit flexible naman po kami dyan.
Yes.
Kung makaka-apekto sa safety, negative. If it's okay, flexible po kami.
And libingan ng mga bayani, malapit po yan dun sa Heritage Memorial. So, alam ko yan kasi pag dumadaan ako doon or naglalakad ako doon, masyadong mababa talaga. Parang pwede kang pwede mong abutin.
In addition pa po, ano ba kalimutan ko, meron tayong mga helicopter routes. Yan, na they require lower altitude.
Yes.
Baka ang operation po ay dyan sa area yan. May mga helipads tayo sa Makati. At bawat helipad po yan, o heliport, kung tinatawag, meron din silang glide path, ay meron silang final approach, departure area. So how do you know kung yung area of operation niya ay nandyan? So, kailangan, sinasabi namin, if you're within the 10 kilometer radius, get registered and have a waiver or get us authorization prior or before departure to CAAP in air traffic service. Yes.
I think 20 minutes na tayo. I think this is my last question. Many people are asking about using UAVs in the delivery of goods, transport of people, the technology that is happening right now. Especially that physical contact transactions are really not safe right now. In the first part of our series, we asked Attorney Frank and Mr. Escobar about this. I would also ask, is the ATS and is the aircraft registration section of the Airworthiness Department ready for this UAVs to be integrated in our airspace?
Kami, sa air traffic service, masasabi ko lang na yes. Kaya nga, the first steps the first step is registration. If your drone is registered, pwede na natin i-integrate yan sa airspace natin. Pero this is a developing procedures po. Halos lahat naman ng bansa, even the United States and Europe, continuous development ang ginagawa nito. Dahil wala pang established procedure, bago po itong technology nito, pinag-aaralan dahil dito na tayo talaga kapag.
Yes, and a lot of research.
Yep.
As regards drone, passenger drone, currently we do not have a regulation yet regarding that. We also have actually one inquiry about that, and we're still gonna have a meeting about that certain concern. So for now, we are still going to, probably we can recommend or try to create more established procedures and guidelines. But as of now, we can't register
And it takes
drone.
it is a long procedure.
Yes.
It takes a lot of coordination from the air navigation surveys,
The engineers,
ATS,
aeronautical engineers.
yes, the specifics of the drones that needs na pwedeng i-register kung ano yung mag-operate or not. I think that is my last question. Any final words to our participants here who are very interested, Ms. Roda?
So in behalf of CAAP, an aircraft registration section, it would really be awesome if you guys will register your drones for your own safety and for the public safety. And also, parang so that everybody can parang at ease or relief that these drones are guided by the law, or they were able to they have undergone the procedures set forth by CAAP. And I know the requirements that we have are not that easy, but we already registered 400 plus drones, and it will be very awesome if you guys can register your drones.
Sir.
Yeah, I repeat, the first step towards successful integration of the unmanned industry into our air traffic management is to get registered. And then we assume, and we always expect, na alam niyo na po yung rules of the air, lahat ng regulation ng HAAP ay you should know it by heart. Pangalawa, bago kayo lumipad po, you should know your airspace, the requirement of that airspace. And then if you're able to integrate in the future, we're expecting na i-follow natin yung standards sa air traffic management, metrology, separation, communication standards, and we will continue training. Alam namin bago ito, so hindi naman po nagpapabaya ang management. May continuous training tayo about drones, about new technologies. Ang goal naman natin dito is safety. Yun lang naman po.
We don't wanna restrict anyone. We just wanna have a clear and safe and secure skies.
I think that's it for the third part of our RPAS webinar series. I hope you learned as much as I did from our speakers today, and join us in the part 4 of our RPAS webinar series this coming Friday, October 30, and same time, and we will be talking about RPAS operator certification, and we have some industry updates as well as technology updates. So thank you again, and good morning.